Welcome to the new podcast, Cancer Simplified. My name is Duncan Darrow, and I will be the host for this program. I'm the founder of Fighting Chance, and for 22 years I've run the charity, which is the East End's only free cancer counseling center. At our clinic in Sag Harbor, we have a staff that has included oncology social workers and clinical psychologists. They have provided over 5,000 free counseling sessions to East End cancer patients who feel the disease is eroding their mental health and their emotional well-being. The goal of our podcast, sort of like our free counseling, is to simplify what cancer is all about so that the disease will be easier for patients and caregivers to understand, not to mention the general public. In most circumstances, the medical experts who are available locally at Stony Brook Medicine can provide the highest standard of care, but there are a few times, really just a few, when patients must travel to specialized treatments in New York City cancer centers. Last year with our partner Hampton Jitney, we provided this transportation in many cases. And so with that, let's just get started. Hello, this is Duncan Darrow with another podcast about Cancer Simplified, brought to you by Fighting Chance, a cancer counseling clinic free of charge in Sag Harbor for the last 22 years. We're going to talk about today is something a little bit spiritual. That's another dimension of the cancer journey. So a few months after Fighting Chance opened for business in the fall of 2002, some 20 years ago, we hired our first full-time therapist. Her name was Carrie Robinson. Local-based cancer patients visited our Sag Harbor clinic, and before long, Carrie had a very packed schedule of appointments, all free of charge. Nothing like Carrie's expertise had ever been offered on the East End to cancer patients. Our therapist spent 10 years as an oncology social worker at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, the number one cancer center in the country, and was preeminent in her small but growing profession, offering specialized talk therapy to cancer patients. Every so often, I'd ask Carrie how things were going and usually received an upbeat report. But I distinctly recall asking, what is the most frequently requested intervention or request for empowerment, Carrie? And she replied, Duncan, the number one request is always teach me to pray. Teach me to pray. So I asked Carrie, what do you say in response? And Carrie said, well, do you remember Sister Anne Marino, who runs the Cor Maria Retreat House just across the road from where we are? And when patients want instruction on how to pray, I just send them to Sister Anne. The collaboration which Carrie forged with Sister Anne continued for almost 2 decades. Year after year, we would send patients to visit the sister, who became a remarkable resource for those patients who were seeking a closer bond and a way to communicate with the Almighty. Just as a side light here, at Memorial Sloan Kettering, which I mentioned earlier and is really a gigantic facility, how many chaplains do you think are employed full-time at Memorial? I was surprised to learn there are 10 chaplains, and they are, you could say, running around, going room to room, but they are spending time with patients every single day, and their training is divinity school for 3 years after college, plus a 4th year to learn about chaplaincy in a hospital setting. So someone at Memorial thinks that spirituality has at least some role in the cancer journey. So one day when I was visiting the clinic, I bumped into a patient named Susie, and she was in her late 50s and had lung cancer. She had just returned from a visit with Sister Ann, and I asked her how it went. How did it go, Susie? And she said, well, I have an angel on my shoulder looking after me night and day. My first instinct was to say, come on. But instead, I asked about the angel, and Susie replied that she actually felt the angel looking at her, looking after her, maybe strong enough to help her beat cancer. Who knows? Another moment of spirituality, not involving a cancer patient, but profoundly pervasive all across this country, was a gentleman named Damar Hamlin. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he was with a football team, the Buffalo Bills. And in January 2023, while playing in a professional football game, he was severely injured, and I mean severely. The television audience watched in horror as Damar writhed in agony after he was tackled so violently that he seemed to bend into a pretzel. And then his heart stopped. Technically, he was dead. Or was he? Amazingly, within a few moments, Damar was revived, but anything like a recovery was weeks away. The news of his injury spread like wildfire. Scores of Americans did exactly what you would expect. They started to pray, just like Susie. Before long, with the collective power of the internet, a so-called prayer group with thousands of members, the largest ever in recorded modern history, had galvanized, and they just kept praying. This internet prayer group, again, of thousands of people, all praying for one thing, that this football player survive. And before long, he was out of the hospital. And 1 year later, he was back playing football. So if you wonder about the power of prayer, there's one for the record books. Which leaves me also with the suggestion, for those of you who do pray or are just learning to, don't be skeptical of miracles. The next time you know of someone suffering, perhaps from cancer, pray to God, and they will be given maybe at least a fighting chance. Not a miracle, but a fighting chance. Another question with the power of prayer is whether the act of prayer is helpful to the individual who is praying. So not to the football player in the hospital, but to all these thousands of Americans who were praying for him. What happened to their mind, to their psyche, to their soul? For some insight on that question, I'll use my own experience. In the spring of 2001, my mother was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. She lived 100 days, and I was her main caregiver. For just about every one of those days, I set aside some time around sunset and drove down to the beach, which wasn't far away, kind of stared up in the sky, and tried my best to talk to God. And what I said was, I'm not asking for a miracle, but what I would appreciate is a fighting chance. And that of course, became the name of our charity. Not asking for a miracle, just want a fighting chance. And those moments made me feel stronger, feel better, whatever you want to put it. So just to point out that the act of prayer doesn't just benefit the person who is the target of the prayer, but it also can benefit the person who's praying. There's that music again, which means we're coming to the end of this podcast. By all means, first of all, visit our website, fightingchance.org. At the top of the homepage, you'll see a podcast button. Press it and you can gain access to this podcast and all the other podcasts that we've prepared. The homepage also lets you click through to other services of Fighting Chance, which are available to residents of the East End of Long Island. For example, there is counseling appointments to help patients get through the highs and lows during the battle with cancer. There are free local taxis to get you to cancer-related doctor appointments on the South Fork. There are free Hampton Jitney tickets if you need to see a specialist in New York City, such as Memorial Sloan Kettering. And there's also a free local resource guide, about 25 pages, that we produce in partnership with the American Cancer Society. If you have any questions about what we've discussed in this podcast, please email them to admin@fightingchance.org, and we will try to get back to you individually or answer your inquiry in the next podcast. Oop, there's that music again. Time to go. Hope you tune in again to Cancer Simplified, brought to you by Fighting Chance.